right, this is mainly for the benefit of those of you who are not here for the lecture today. And we got one, two, three, four, six out of 9 people are here today. All right, Keegan's not here, Jason's not here, and Yvonne's not here. Now, you'll notice with Jason and Keegan, your name's not on here. That's not a problem. You'll just have to share the machines when you get here. We have 6 machines. Keegan's normally here, so that's how I amortized or set up the 6 machines. All right. So when you first start the machine, and the only one who'll have to do this is Keegan because the other 5 have already done it, that'll be your login. And I just made these up. I went out to Gmail and opened up 6 accounts. Blackhawk Tech College 01 at gmail.com, 02, 03, 04, 05, and 06. And the password is just BTC with the number that's over here and 4 commas. The funny thing is, that told me in using Apple's, said that was a strong password. So, yeah. As soon as I put in 4 commas, boy, it just jumped from weak to strong right away. So we're doing that. Then on those machines, and what Mr. Algandari has done here is if you go out to the App Store for Mac, if you actually go out to the App Store and you try to download, all right, if you try to download Xamp, I'm sorry, not X, if you try to download Xcode, what they'll do is they ask you for credit card information. He found a way around that. He basically found the Xcode executable, so has it out on his Dropbox account, and what he's going to do is put a link out there to it, and then people can copy that. So Keegan, you'll have to do that if you got questions. And again, for Kim and Jason, if you come in here and on those days, like I said, I only had 6 machines. Jason, you can share with Bob, and Yvonne, you can always share with your husband. All right. So notice his name's not in there because his father bought him his own machine, so his name isn't in there. So what we're doing right now as a class is we're going out there and we're everybody logged in. Everybody has to set up an Apple ID, and those of you, this is especially important for Keegan and for Yvonne and for Jason. All right, all of you, please go out if you have not already done so and set up an Apple ID. The reason for that is, regardless of the machine that you're using, when I register the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of you, that's how many are in this class. When I register the 9 of you, who am I missing here? I'm missing somebody. But when I register all of you for the class, they need an Apple ID. All right, who am I missing? Because there's 9 in the class. So I got to turn that off for a minute. I am forgetting, but I'm forgetting. So. Oh, Stefan would be the other one. Yeah, I'm leaving names off here. I can't figure out who I'm missing. You. There. All right. So that's everybody. Bring that back up. What's that, Bob? There should be a link when you go out, when you're, no, you don't even have to do that. You can do it right from your machine. And if you go way up in the upper left-hand corner of your options, it's the thing, I think it's the one that looks like an apple. One of those, that one or the one next to it has got a thing to go to Apple Store. All right, now I'm gonna. If you don't have to. No one has to look, but if you listen for just a couple minutes, I want to explain to you too what's going on in here. Before I do, Kim, could you shut the door, please? Okay. I know. I'm recording. Okay. I have. Right now, we have no way to capture the screen stuff coming from the Mac in Camtasia. Okay? How do I get around that? Well, either we got to come through here and we've got to do a heck of a lot of manipulation, which may or may not work, or I have to buy Camtasia for the Mac, which is 300 bucks. Well, I'm not going to lay out the 300 bucks. And I'm not sure if the school will or not. I'm trying to wait and trying to catch my boss on a nice day. That's why I said shut that, because if she walked by and heard me say that, well, I'm always in a good mood, yeah, whatever. But I'm hoping that we can do that. But for now, when I put up files and stuff, I'm probably just going to bring them up in Notepad. So I'm not going to be able to run them from this machine. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. Did you post the link? Or do you, oh, okay. I can look here too if you want. You know, it's... I don't know, I just put in Apple Xcode executable, and all it wants to show me is where it's going to save the executable file, you know, so that's not going to help much. All right. I'll tell you what, while we're doing this and everybody's sort of getting acclimated or whatever, all right, this is what I want to do today. Before we even do this, let me tell you, not this Thursday, next Thursday. Okay, so the 30th. I'm only going to be here till 4. All right, so we're going to call class after an hour, and I'm going to have to put the machines away. It's not that I don't trust you, but the only way that I could have you put them away would be to tell you the combination of the safe, and they don't want students to know that combination. All right, and the reason for that, I just talked to my boss about this. She told me that there's a meeting next Friday, the 31st, at Gateway Technical College, and I'm part of this consortium, so I've got to go to that meeting. I'm driving up Thursday, all right? And I said, I want to get as much of the ride done during the daylight as I can, because I don't have a clue as to where I'm going. I'll have the GPS, but I still don't know. She said, well, then why don't you just leave at 4, because you'll probably have light for at least the first hour, and that'll get me most of the way there. All right? So that'll be the plan. What I'd like to do is to go to our book, and when I say our book, I mean the one with a bicycle on it right here. All right? And I'd like to jump, you basically whip through just the straight C stuff that's in there and in that other book that I told you about, meaning this one right here. All right, so I'd like to do that today. And if by that time Xcode is on your machines or whatever, that'd be great. And if it's not, we'll try to figure out something else. All right, I will tell you that for very, very, very many of the programs that are in this book, all the programs in part 1 of the book, in part 2 of the book, in part 3 of the book, so the first 30 chapters, okay, the first 30 chapters, what I'll talk about, you set up your programs the same way. Did everybody hear that? You're going to do the equivalent for the first 30 chapters of this book to what we did last semester in Windows for C. They're just command line programs. Okay? All right. Chapter 31, as it says, is your first iOS application. This is the one I'm still working with. And 32 is your first Cocoa. All right? So right now, I've already put out there on the system, if you all remember. Again, you don't have to look up here, but otherwise just remember. Because I told you this the first day of class. For some reason you weren't here, you weren't listening then. I'm just going to quick say it again. That under the Spring 2014 in-class, there's a folder that's called Hillegass. Those have got all the programs for the first 30 chapters in the book in them. All right, I've got the other ones from the later chapters. I don't know why they aren't put on here. They're either on this or they're on the machine that I've got upstairs. But you'll have all of them. Every single program that's in that book other than the regular C programs. And some of the C programs are like Hello World types of stuff. And I didn't want to put those out there. I didn't want to take the time to do those, so I didn't. All right? So, notice that at the beginning of this book, what they talk about in here in part 1. Well, you in this book, see an objective, see how this book works, your first program, how to get started with Xcode. And they do not say a thing in there about having to pay anything. All right, and like I said, I did it right before Christmas? No. October. And they didn't no one asked me for anything. I did it from my house, and I did it using one of, I've got a machine upstairs that's like yours, except it's older. It's not as thin as yours is. It didn't? And I don't know why that is. All right. So I want to run through these first. All right, so I want to go through these first 12 chapters, and we're going to bump through those really quickly. Then at the end of the book, they have some advanced C, which really isn't all that advanced C, for like 4 or 5 chapters. So I want to go through those. When we get done with that, we'll take a break. After we get done with the break, I'm going to switch to the other book for which you have the PDF, and I have a PDF and the hard copy, and I'm going to go over a few chapters in there. Does that make sense? So we may not get to type much in today, but if everybody has Xcode, I'll be happy. All right, so if we can come up with a way to do that, I'll be happy. God knows we all want me to be happy. All right. So you in this book, one thing about this book, just so you know, if you read this book right here, the one with a bicycle on it, if you read the reviews, it's mushrooms. People love it or they hate it. All right, and it's pretty much for the same reason. There are a lot of code examples in here, and some people love this because it just gets you going right away. And other people think, they say that the examples they're too hard. They're not. You can all understand the stuff that's in here. All right, you all have the programmatic background where that shouldn't be a problem. One thing I don't like about the book, and if you can, please, if you can make me a liar, please do. All right, what he says in here is he will not offer the source code. See what I'm saying? You can't go out to any site and find the source code. He said that to him, part of learning the language is keying the stuff in, which is not a bad philosophy to tell you the truth. But I keyed them in, and if you want those, fine, and if you don't want them, that's fine. All right, they're out there anyway. All right, so he talks about how the book works, and basically they give you code in just about every chapter. Okay, just so you're aware of that. All right. Now, I want to mention when they talk about getting started. All right, notice here, you can download the latest version for free from the App Store. You may want to drag it, yeah, whatever. All right. So, Xcode we've talked a little bit about before, and you will see it, yes you will. And it says everything basically you'll need to do, you'll do in here. Now, if you look up on the screen here, notice there's iOS and there's OS X. All right. For all the chapters in the book, with the exception of chapters 31 and 32, they expect you to choose OS X, an application and command line tool. In other words, when you go and run this, it'll be very similar to what we did last semester, except that when you ran them last semester, you had to go and first compile it and link it, and then you had to run it. Here it'll do it in one step, and it'll take your output and it'll put it right in a command line window for you, or in the console window. So you'll see that in just a minute. Long story short, you're going to be choosing command line tool for the majority of the ones that are in here. When you do that, it's going to look very much like you're creating a C program. But again, if you look up on the screen here, all right, product name, don't put any blank spaces in there. Organization name, it's up to you. You don't leave it blank, but if you want to, I mean, if Steve wants to write Bacon Incorporated, he can make that if he wants to. All right. So what they say is you can put any name in there you want. What he meaning the author of the book puts the Big Nerd Ranch in there because that's where he's employed. All right, I'd suggest in here what I typically did was I put Blackhawk Technical College here, and just like we looked at in the last class, I would put here edu.blackhawk.jscott. And then the name of the program. Very similar to the way we set it up last time. Notice it's different though. This is a company identifier. This is not a package. Okay, everybody hear that? This is not a package name. All right. And notice the type in here. Well, when he until he gets for the first dozen or so chapters, he keeps the type set to C. All right. There might be a thing that comes up that asks you if you want to create a code repository. It's up to you. We'll talk about that as we all get on and get into it. All right. If you look up on the screen here, you see your Xcode window, and it's broken into 3 areas. What you'll see over here will be your Explorer, and so that's where all your files will be shown. This is your work area in the middle, and all of your inspectors are going to be shown on the right. Also, when you go to run the program, if you look on the screen, your output's going to appear down here in what you see in the blue. That'll be your console window down there. All right. They do mention that up at the top of the screen, you've got these buttons that you see here. And after you've got Xcode put in, loaded, installed, and you start clicking those buttons, that's how you're able to take things on the screen and make them appear and disappear. Hide, show, whatever you want to call it. So they show you the areas. That's their fancy names. Let me just tell you, if I could just get your attention, if you look up on the screen just for a second, if you're writing straight C programs, it'll look like this. You'll have a main.c, etc., and you'll have very few files. As soon as we create the first Objective-C program, you'll see a lot more files, a lot more. And you will not have a .c file after that. Your equivalent of a .c file will be a .m file, M for implementation, and you'll have a .h file for your header file. All right, so you'll see those as we get started in here. So notice this is what you get by default. Everybody see this? That's actually what you get by default. It gives you a comment that's got the name of the program, the name of the file created by, and it's whatever your machine name is. All right, and it's got the date, and that copyright, I believe, is going to be what you put in there for your company identifier. All right. Does this look familiar? Include stdio.h, int main, int argc, const char star argv, bracket bracket, return 0, and the ending curly. Does all that look familiar? The only thing that looks different is, actually in here, is they automatically put in, so if you wrote your C hello world, that's all you'd have to do. Okay? Again, please look up on the screen just for a second, because it's just, I said this the other day, but just so you know. When we get to Objective-C, you won't use printf. It'll be nslog. All right? And nslog, again, will make, either way, your output is going to come down here in your log window. Then they explain, well, you know what all this stuff is. Again, that's just a real simple C program. So a lot of this we can just jump through very quickly. To run the program, up in Xcode, you click that button. Not very hard. That's it. The button that's in blue up there on the screen, that's how you run the program. You can also, depending on the menu you've got up, you might have a run on it, but that's typically the way that I do it. If it works, notice down here, that's your console window, and notice there's your output. If it doesn't work, you're going to get an error message. I'd suggest that when you start writing this, you get the program to work, comment out something, add an extra colon, semicolon, or whatever. All right. How programming works, I think you all know that. This is all on C variables and types. If-else statement, like I said, we're going to whip through a lot of this fast. Functions, This is kind of a neat program. This is me speaking, but they do 100 bottles of beer on the wall, and they write it as a loop. I just thought that was kind of neat, so. All right. They don't write that as a loop. They write it in here as a loop, but there you go. See that? All right. And then they explain what's happening through there. That's not that big a thing. We've gone through stuff like this before. When you go through in this debugger or in this IDE, just like we did in Visual Studio, if you look, notice what I just put in blue right here. You click in there, guess what happens? You create a breakpoint. Very, very similar to the way we did it in Visual Studio. All right. You can set up watch windows. It's all pretty much done the same way. The stuff for working with that is all down here. You've got step through, step into, step over, etc. The same kind of things that we had for Visual Studio. And they work basically the same way too. All right. Maybe the first page in this book that's actually worth going over, page 41, global and static variables. When you create a program, if you look up on the screen here, that variable, not that one. Let's see. This variable right here in main. All right. Technically, that's an automatic variable. In fact, it is legal for you to write auto in front of it. Any variable that you create inside of a function or a method is automatic. It comes to life when it's declared. It goes out of scope or out of life, out of existence when it gets to the curly. All right. If you want that to stay in existence after the curly, you can put the word static in front of it, just like we've done in other languages. All right, what that does is it keeps the value in that memory location. It still is only accessible in here, but if you put static there, if I added one to freeze in C or something like that, the next time I came in, it wouldn't be 0 anymore, it would be 1. That type of an idea. On the other hand, global variables are designed to be used, we talked a little bit about this last semester, with that extern statement. Global variables are typically designed that you're going to have several files in the same program that need to use the same variable. Strings, you already know printf, so it doesn't pay to talk about that. It'll change. That'll actually change when we get into talking about the way it's done in Objective-C. Numbers, you know what integers are, but I will mention one thing in here. Thought it was in this chapter, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't. All right. You're used to working with int and float, but what you're going to see is there's also an NS integer, and the NS for next step that we'll be using more than these. All right. If you just need a simple variable, you can still use these even in Objective-C. There's not a problem with doing that. And it's easier because you don't have to worry about making a pointer to it. There's no asterisk involved. It's in this chapter, so there's no. Am I going backwards or I'm going the wrong way? There you go. All right, loops. You know a while loop. You know a for loop. Break and continue in the do while. There's nothing new in there. All right, let's jump into everybody's favorite topic: addresses and pointers. All right, so I'm up already to page 65 in here. And we all know what pointers are, etc. And probably the nitnoid that you have for an instructor probably didn't show you this last semester. And I did know it, but I just never probably showed it to you. If you use %p, we used %d last semester, and that's decimal integer. We use %f for floats and doubles, etc. But if you use %p, that's designed to show you an address. So notice right there, I stores its value at, and it'll show you something like this. And that's the address in memory of where that pointer exists. So if you ever do have to know that, that is a way that you can find it out. All right. Other than that, there's not a whole lot in this chapter that we haven't already gone over. They say asterisk and ampersand. The pass by reference, again, we've talked about this one. The fact that, remember that if you pass values in C by default, they're passed simple variables, etc., they're passed by value. That if you want to pass them in and be able to change them, you have to pass them by reference. Here's an example in the program that's on page 73. It's actually a pretty good program. All right. So we've got meters to feet and inches. We're passing in what? Double for meters, unsigned int, a pointer to an unsigned int for feet, and a pointer to double for, which is an inches pointer. The point is that we're going, no pun intended, but we're going to change the value here of ft pointer and the value of in pointer. So we pass them in. Oh, why those aren't ampersands there? All right, and because we're passing them in as pointers, it'll be a permanent change. All right. Again, I didn't run any of these programs. When I went through this stuff, I went through every chapter that's in here. They're all marked up as I always do, and they're marked up. They're in 4 different colors. All right. There's pink, there's yellow, and there's green. All right. Structures we talked about near the end of last semester. What I like about this, and the only thing that I want to show you here, is the author first shows you how to set up a simple structure. There's a person. All right, and the only 2 properties that has are a height and a weight. Okay? Then he comes through here and he does all this. He sets up a structure of that type. Then he says the dot height in meters and the dot weight in meters. Then he sets up another structure and does the same thing and then prints them out. Not a problem. But what I liked about this, and we talked about this last semester, is he says rather than doing all that work, do a type def. And we did this last semester. You should all remember this. When we did that employees program, we did type defs. So there's nothing new in there. What I like about it, this is the example on page 76 in the book, is he shows you, he meaning the author, shows you one way of doing it on the previous page, and it says you probably won't want to do it like that. You'll probably want to do it like this. It's less code. It's much more straightforward. All right. Again, same stuff that we talked about last semester. All right. This is fairly new. All right, this was in your book, but I really didn't spend any time on it unless you happen to watch those extra lectures that I taped. All right, after we got done with the chapters, the final chapter, we went over the book. It was like 19 or something like that. And I went and did tapes on 20 through like 26 or just about all those chapters. One of those chapters talked about the heap. All right, the big difference is when when you're working on the stack and when you're working on the heap. If I screw this up, I know Bob will correct me. All right, but to my knowledge at least, when you're working with the stack, every time you're working with variables inside of functions, you're working with the stack. All right, every time you're working with things that you're dynamically allocating, you're working with the heap. All right, typically it's you've got in my opinion at least, the heap is a little bit more liberal in what it allows you to do. That said, you as a programmer are responsible for when you allocate things out that come from the heap, you've got to free them up again. And again, if you don't do that, what's going to end up happening is that memory will still be out there and it'll be allocated. And if somebody else, even though it's no one is accessing it, and you probably can't even do anything with it. And if you try to, if you leave it out there long enough, that's where you'll get a memory leak. And I've told people in the past too that in years past, still a lot of the software is written either in C or C++, and a lot of times back in the olden days when you'd get that blue screen of death, a lot of times those were from memory leaks. All right. So the author talks about local variables are automatic. I already mentioned that. Sometimes, again, you need to get a contiguous chunk of memory, some kind of a buffer, and as it says, on the heap, the buffer is independent, basically, of any function. All right. But as we talked about, you have to allocate it using either alloc, or really typically malloc or realloc. What you're going to end up doing almost all the time in Objective-C is you're going to be using alloc. All right. And the good news is once you allocate it, typically it'll automatically be kept track of for you. So you'll allocate it, but you won't have to free it. That's not always true, but it'll quite often be true. What happened in about, I think it was 4.2 of Xcode, they introduced something called ARC, which is automatic reference counting, which meant that the system would basically keep track that when you allocated something, it would take care of the deallocation typically for you. All right, and I'm simplifying it. There's more to it than that. You'll see this in a later chapter. All right. If you want to, you can still take charge of it yourself. But by default in here, the ARC is turned on. All right. All right, so we've looked at stuff like this before. When you've used malloc, and typically when you use malloc, you have to tell it how much, and you typically use size of. All right, and when you're done, you free it, and it's also a good idea to set it back equal to no. Again, we've talked about all this stuff last semester. There's nothing new in there. And it's showing you here basically, I always love pictures like this because if you said it looks nothing like that, there'd be no way to prove it or not prove it anyway. You know, this is somebody drawing their interpretation of what memory in the stack and the heap is going to look like. So before I jump into this, again, near the end of the book, they have an advanced C section. I'm going to run through this, then we're going to take a break. All right, again, not a lot in here that's new, and some of the stuff that is new I don't want to talk about anyway. All right, such as, well, they come in here, and again, I rely on Bob, and I don't think he minds the questions, and if he does, he at least acts like he doesn't. Did you use a lot of bitwise operations when you were a programmer? Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I used some bit fields and did some stuff like that, but in the application programming that I used, I never had to do any bitwise ANDing or ORing or XORing. I never really had to. For what? Okay. Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. You can also make the case that really there's only a couple of operations, computer or mathematical operations that a computer does. All right. Yeah. And all the other stuff that you tell it to do, it's basically doing ANDing and ORing and exclusive ORing. All right. So they go through this and they talk about what a bitwise OR is. What it's doing is right here, since it's an OR, it compares. Look, there's a 1 and a 0. One of them's got a 1, so it's a 0. It's a 0 and a 0, so it's a 0, etc. So when one or both of them have a 1 here, it becomes a 1 down here. When they both have a 0, it becomes a 0 down here. All right, that's basically a bitwise OR. When you work with an AND, they have to both be 1. All right, and when you work with, so there's an AND. Notice there they're both 1. There they're both 1. Everything else is a 0. Now, you know the truth tables because I know Julie Bellman beats these into you literally for ANDing and ORing. The difference with, you know what an OR is? It's one or both are true, right? With exclusive OR, only one can be true. I don't know if she talks about exclusive OR with you guys or not. All right, but with that, if you're comparing two things, one has to be 1 and one has to be 0. That's the difference. So there's an exclusive OR. So notice 1 and 0, 1 and 0, 1 and 0, 1 and 0. Everything else, those are all 1s and everything else is a 0. All right. I'm not going to get into shifting because, again, that's how multiplication and division is basically done. All right, it's not that big a thing. I was told once, this was kind of a generalization, but unless you're going to be doing a lot of work with operating systems or intricate things in the machine, probably the amount of work you will do with those will be minimal. And that's what I found in my programming career. All right. Yeah. Yeah. And what's cool, what is kind of cool is, I've mentioned this to you before, that when I was going for my master's, I went and took an architecture class. So I learned how to wire all that stuff up to actually see it in action. And it is pretty, it's different to see that actually work. All right, in here, you know already what the char star is. We've talked about this before. All right, so the word love as a C string. LOVE \0. Well, we've talked about that. Okay, just so you know, the char star, basically this, pretty much goes away when you're talking Objective-C. Okay? We use NS string instead. Why? Because it's got a bunch of functionality that's set up for Objective-C. It's not that you can't use this anymore. Anything that is C can still be used in Objective-C. But the recommendation is always, if there's a way to do it as a C way and an Objective-C way, you use the Objective-C way. All right? And literals, you know what a string literal is, etc. This is all stuff. This is a little note. Notice, if you're using a C string in an Objective-C program, you can convert them back and forth. So this is the kind of thing that we're going to be writing. So what is that? Well, actually, what this says right here is what we want to do is we want to call this routine that's called string with C string colon, and we want to pass it greeting. All right, and it also has another parameter called encoding that we want to pass NSUTF-8 string encoding. And if you say, I don't get that, well, that's what the class is about. But you can go back and forth if you need to between C strings and Objective-C strings. All right. All right. Arrays. This is kind of a neat program. I wish there had been something like this in your book, or I'd been smart enough to think of something like this. Because what they do here is they show you. Notice what they come in and do here. They malloc for an array of 3 grades. Okay? And when they get done, they free it and they set it equal to null. And then they say, now, you probably will never want to do that because if you just write it the way we've written it, it's done for you automatically. But what's nice is that what they're showing you is kind of behind the scenes what's happening here. All right? Again, all this stuff that's in here, we're going to be walking through a bunch of this. All right? So when you look at this code right now, it may not make a whole lot of sense, and ideally it'll make more sense as we go on. All right, but that's Objective-C code right there. And this is the thing with this auto-release pool, all right, that basically when you allocate something, it'll be deallocated for you. All right? And we'll get into that in just a bit. Running for the command line, I don't care. And I think the last one, yeah, just on the simple switch statement. That's it. So what I want to do is I want to take a break, all right, and after we take the break, I want to come back and talk a little bit about what's in this book. I want to go through the first 4 chapters of this book. The first 2 are just, a lot of it we'll jump through quickly because, again, it's C. But the last 2 are Objective-C, and that'll be the first time we're going to look at some real Objective-C code. So let's take a break, and let's come back at 10 after 4, please.